uncertainty has become the new normal, Africa stands at a crossroads, having to answer an urgent question. Will African nations unite and claim Africa's place at the decision-making table? Or will the continent be on the menu of global powers in an increasingly aggressive competition for capital, natural and human resources? At this critical time, the Africa CEO Forum calls on its community to chart a new future for Africa through 4 agendas. A new era of political and corporate leadership focused on improved governance and best-in-class public policies for the continent. A paradigm shift to put AI, tech education and infrastructure at the heart of African policy making. An urgent push to make seamless intra-African trade an operational reality 5 years after the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement entered into force. And a focus on building a world-class African financial industry while seizing the new financing opportunities offered by a world in transition. The time for action is now. Let's shape a new future for Africa. A future that looks like this.
Thanks to the continuing integration success story of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, the region has recorded the highest growth in our annual World Economic Outlook for the 3rd year running.
非洲正成为中国最重要的贸易伙伴，中国将把关键有先领域的制造。
Okay, if you're not invested in the 10 African lions, what are you waiting for? This diverse group of companies, led by Access Holdings, Dangote Industries, OCP, and EcoBank, has made incredible waves in the past year, with investors from around the world crowding in to get exposure to this upside story.
The United States of America has always recognized the potential power of African unity. Today, I am happy to see it become a reality with the addition of the African Union as a permanent member of the UN Security Council.
And why not even like this?
There's nobody that knows the Africans better than me. Great people, the best people, and amazing CEOs, the greatest anywhere in the world.
Okay, maybe that's pushing it a little bit, but definitely like this.
Oh yeah, we see a great future in Africa. I'm happy to announce that after careful consultation on fiscal incentives with the authorities, we are relocating our corporate headquarters to Kigali, effective next year.
Now let's make it reality.
Good morning. Your Excellencies, good morning. Distinguished guests, good morning. Captains championing for a prosperous Africa, good morning. My name is Fifi Peters, and it is truly an honor to be with you here today at the 2024 Africa CEO Forum, essentially the epicenter of business discourse for the next 2 days, just given the fact that it is the largest private sector gathering on the continent of its kind. Now, we have just heard from some really important people who have had some really important and good things, I think, to say about the African continent right now. You heard what the IMF Managing Director had to say. You heard what China's President Xi had to say. You would have even heard what a fellow African who sometimes, in fact, more often than not forgets his roots, my boy Elon. I mean, I can call him that as a fellow South African. And you also heard from a president who could soon reenact Arnold Schwarzenegger's Terminator and live out the classic line and be back. Will certainly make for some interesting times if that does happen. But those individuals had some really important and good things to say about the continent. Why they matter, they're really important, and perhaps they do represent the views of a lot of important people globally. Positive sentiments that perhaps make us think that perhaps the continent has finally arrived at the table, and finally does have a seat at that table, and a voice that is heard and respected. Or was that just smokes and mirrors? And does Africa remain the pounded yam, or the jollof rice, or the chakalaka that continues to be passed around? Ladies and gentlemen, essentially for the next 2 days, this is what we are going to be unpacking and digesting, and I'm looking forward to hearing all of your views on the above. Do feel free to support our fellow African who sometimes forgets his roots, whose margins are being squeezed on X, by sharing some of the commentary that does stand out to you here for the next 2 days. Use the hashtag ACF 2024, of course. You can also handle me. I'd be happy to hear some of the insights that you do share. But to officially kick off today's program, as is tradition, many of you will not be surprised by the gentleman who will be addressing us right now, certainly no stranger to most of you in the room. He is part of the contributors that helped to give birth to this platform, essentially, and that has helped nurture the growth of this platform for the past decade and plus. And he is going to help us better understand the thinking behind the theme for the CS Forum of At the Table or on the Menu. He's the CEO, of course, of the Africa CEO Forum, and also the CEO of the Jeune Afrique Media Group. Ladies and gentlemen, kindly help me welcome with a warm applause on stage, Mr. Amir Ben Hamid.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Excellencies, Mr. President of Rwanda, Mr. President of Sao Tome, Mr. Prime Minister of Sao Tome, sorry, Mr. President of Mozambique, Mr. Prime Minister of Sao Tome, Mr. Prime Minister of Côte d'Ivoire, dear ministers, heads of institutions, dear participants, dear friends, welcome to Kigali, welcome to the Africa CEO Forum. This is our second edition in Rwanda, so let me start by thanking you, Mr. President, for the support and hospitality, and by telling you that we couldn't have chosen, considering this year's theme, a better setting. 7 months ago, President KAGAME gave to one of our media, Jeune Afrique, a very interesting interview where he analyzed with a lot of clarity some of the issues affecting Africa. I found it very interesting. I shared it on LinkedIn and I wrote this post, in which, in essence, I was trying to express two things. The first thing is a very sincere admiration for you, Mr. President KAGAME, for your leadership and achievements. Rwanda marked the 30th commemoration against the genocide against the Tutsi. And over these last 30 years, on top of having one of the steadiest GDP growth rate in Africa, Rwanda has kept churning out inspiring economic success stories. Rwanda, a high-end tourism industry, an event sector ranked #3 in Africa, industrial investment from BioNTech, one of the hottest pharma companies in the world. The list is very long, but I was just given 8 minutes for my speech, so I'm going to stop here. But I'm just going to ask you one thing, Mr. President, if you don't mind. It's a personal request. On top of these glowing achievements, I know Rwanda is supporting PSG or sponsoring PSG. So I would like you, please, to give them some advice on how to finally win the Champions League. I'm a fan, and I'm desperate. No, more seriously, a solid governance system, a strong support to private sector investment have made Rwanda a role model for leadership and strategic investments. This is a remarkable performance. This is the essence of the CEO Forum, and I think it deserves a round of applause. And as I said, it couldn't be more aligned with the themes of this edition. At the table or on the menu. I'm sure you have guessed by now that we didn't plan to do a food summit, but the idea behind this title is that over the last two editions, we've had very upbeat conversation about sovereignty, about the numerous opportunities it created for the African private sector. But this year, when we prepared for this edition, we heard a very different tune. We heard a private sector worried. Worried about three things. Number one, the unity of the continent. If you look at it thoroughly, 30% of the continent is embroiled in a kind of direct or covert confrontation. The second issue is our attractiveness. 5 years ago, in the same room, not exactly, but in the KCC, we celebrated the inception of the CFTA. And 5 years after this celebration, we have not enough progress, signs of progress on the CFTA. And third issue, our continuing deterioration of macroeconomic finances, with for the first time in 25 years, the increase of poverty on the continent. These issues are threatening to reverse 2 decades of progress. And from these worries was born the theme of the forum. Because for Africa not to land on the menu of global powers, for Africa to secure a place at the table of global negotiation, we radically need to change course. For this to happen, we need transformative agendas. And one agenda in particular, the leadership agenda. And this was the second thing I wanted to express in the LinkedIn post I mentioned earlier. The absolute priority we need to give from now on to governance, leadership, and accountability. Like many of you here, our group is a family business. It was founded by my dad, who was first and foremost a journalist. And I learned a lot of things from my dad's work. It made me curious, and it taught me the value of asking not just questions, but the right questions. And the right question is here, why are we in this situation? Over the last 36 months, 5 countries have gone through a military coup. Numerous numbers have had messy elections. In the last 24 months, a number of economies have had currency crisis, debt defaults, if not both. This sounds historically familiar. So the right question is, why are we in this situation again? And I think we need to be honest here. The situation, we are in this situation because we often ignore problems of leadership. We often look the other way when governance was meddled with. We overlooked problems of accountability. And we did that because business was good, money was flowing, and it was easier to sweep these issues under the rug rather than addressing them. But you are CEOs, heads of institutions, heads of states, and we all know that's what not leaders do. I'm sure you're familiar with Einstein's quote on insanity. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. And I think in this room nobody's crazy, and I think that none of us wants the next 25 years to look like the last 3. So we will need to talk about leadership during this conference. So I'll trust the speakers of the opening panel to set the tone on leadership because they're undeniably qualified on that issue. Our heads of states panel tomorrow is not to be missed. They will be addressing this issue of leadership, but also the difficult decisions ahead on climate, on technology, on the CFTA, but also on the talent we need to appoint to the Pan-African institutions that represents Africa on the global stage. There are 2 very important elections in the coming months, the AU and the FDB. We'll hear, speaking about talent and wins, we'll hear the Prime Minister of Côte d'Ivoire, our next year's host of the forum, who will share with us what it is to organize and win an African Cup of Nations, and who will explain to us how he intends to capitalize on that victory to shape a sports industry in this country, in Côte d'Ivoire, I'm sorry. We'll also speak about the other critical agendas, financing. We'll hear the CEO of Access, of AFG, of AFC, KCB, BK, all the alphabet of financiers trying to fund the ambitions of the continent. We'll talk about integration with the free zone and logistical giants, Arise, AGL, MSC, Maersk, Djibouti ports, who will explain to us how to bridge the gap on infrastructure and put Africa on the global trade map. And of course, in the era of AI, we'll talk about this, about technology and disruption with the CEOs of Orange, Huawei, Google, and many other AI African leaders. So, in a sense, it's going to be, in the tradition of the forum, a very rich program that hopefully will kickstart these transformative agendas. Before I give the floor to my friend Makhtar Diop and RDB CEO Francis GATARE, I would just like to give you, as usual, a few news on the development of the Africa CEO Forum. First, I would like to share with you that the platform that we launched 3 years ago, it was in 2021 in Forum, the Africa Financial Summit, has become, thanks to all of you, the premier event, the #1 event for the Africa financial industry. It's gathering now every year 1,000 participants among the most important members of the industry, bankers, insurers, telecom operators, fintechs in Africa, and they're all gathering to create a true Africa of financial services. The next edition will be in Morocco on the 9th and 10th of June, and I invite all the members of the financial community that are here with us today to join us in Casablanca. The second news is related to leadership. I couldn't have stressed enough and how much leadership was important for ourselves, the Africa CEO Forum, not trying to be a change agent. So starting next year, we'll be hosting from 50 to 100 young, high potential civil servants every year in Morocco. It will be done with the University of Mohammed VI on their world-class Rabat campus. Thanks to this program, we plan in a few years to get around a community of around 400 to 500 young political leaders united by a common agenda, excellence in public policies, and dedication to African integration. I seize this opportunity to welcome and greet the President of the University of Mohammed VI. I encourage you and urge you to visit their two campuses. They're the most impressive campus on Africa. They're doing an excellent job on education, and I thank them for being our partners. Just a few thanks before leaving the floor. I would like to give a big thank you for the IFC through his managing director, Makhtar Diop, and his Vice President for Africa, Sergio Pimenta. I would like to thank all of our sponsors whose commitment allow us to raise loud and clear the voice of the private sector. I would like to thank all the teams from the Africa CEO Forum, from Jeune Afrique Media Group, from the Rwanda Development Board who have prepared this conference with passion and enthusiasm. And again, Mr. President, I would like to thank you for your friendship and your support. Have an excellent stay in Kigali and an excellent conference. Thank you.
And of course, one last thank you to you, Amir, and the team for putting together quite a comprehensive and jam-packed program that I am sure we're all looking forward to. Next, we will hear from a speaker representing the host city of this year's Africa CEO Forum, of course, Kigali, my first time, and I can say I'm absolutely suitably impressed and looking forward to seeing a little bit more of the city when time does allow. But ladies and gentlemen, another warm welcome for Mr. Francis GATARE, the CEO of the Rwanda Development Board.
His Excellency Paul KAGAME, President of the Republic of Rwanda, Your Excellencies, Heads of State and Government here present, Honorable Ministers, Mr. Makhtar DIOP, Managing Director, IFC, distinguished CEOs, business leaders, all of you, our guests, good morning. On behalf of the government and the people of Rwanda, we are truly honored to welcome you here in Kigali, Rwanda, for the 2024 Africa CEO Forum. It's an honor for us to have so many of you grace our invitation and come to Kigali for what we think is perhaps the largest Africa CEO Forum so far. We've got many of you who have come from far and near to join our Rwandan business leaders, and I hope and trust that this will be a very productive forum. A special message for those of you who are visiting Rwanda for the first time. I have prepared a short video for you. Thank you. Welcome to Rwanda once again, a country of unparalleled beauty and immense business opportunities. So we are going to be looking forward to do business with you, but we also hope that you will take time to step out of the conference rooms and out of Kigali and enjoy the full hospitality of the Rwandan people. But for your business interests also, I want to invite you to the business to government dialogue we are going to be having this afternoon, where we'll be unfolding the business opportunities in Rwanda, and also to the Invest in Rwanda Forum that we are going to have tomorrow afternoon. We want to explain to you the opportunities, the incentives, and the partnerships available. I want to take this moment to thank Amir and to thank Makhtar for your partnership and for your trust in Rwanda to host for the second time the Africa CEO Forum. We are looking forward to host you many more times in the future, and we want you not only to do business with us, but also to have fun. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
What was happening? All right, thank you so much, Mr. GATARE. And next, reference already made to this gentleman, a long-standing partner of the Africa CEO Forum, of course, and a serial champion of private sector-led economic growth. Can we kindly welcome Mr. Makhtar DIOP, the Managing Director of the International Finance Corporation, to address us next. Thank you, sir.
His Excellency Paul KAGAME, President of Rwanda, His Excellency Felipe Jacinto Nyusi, President of the Republic of Mozambique, His Excellency Dr. Patrick Emery Trovoada, Prime Minister and Head of Government of the Democratic Republic of Sao Tome, and his spouse, Nana Toure Trovoada, His Excellency Robert Begré-Mambé, Prime Minister and Chief of Government of the Republic of Côte d'Ivoire, His Excellency Hugh Alexandre Barrot-Chambrier, Vice Prime Minister of Gabon, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Welcome again to the 2024 edition of the CEO Forum. First, I would like to thank our gracious host, President KAGAME, and the Rwandese people for their warm hospitality and the unwavering commitment to private sector development. I would like also to thank Amir YAHMED and the team of Jeune Afrique for partnering with us to create this flagship event, the premier Pan-African Forum for promoting and supporting African businesses and economies. I would like also to thank the CEO of the Rwanda Development Board, Mr. GATARE, for his hospitality and for the leadership he has shown in organizing this event. It's with a lot of enthusiasm that I stand before you today to reflect on a remarkable journey. I was lucky to be there in Geneva more than 10 years ago when this initiative was launched. Today is happening in Africa, and we had an opportunity to discuss in Africa the pivotal role of innovation in tackling the challenges faced by African economies. Since then, the pace of change has not only accelerated, but it has been reaching some heights. So the question we must now ask is how Africa can seize the opportunities presented by the tech revolution that is reshaping the way we live, we work, and we do business. Artificial intelligence is quickly becoming a mainstream technology, akin in some way to what electricity was a century ago, with the potential to revolutionize the production of goods and services. This is what the economists call a generalized purpose technology. Its applications are vast and varied, from design and economics to education and medicine, and already billions of dollars are being channeled into this exciting sector. 2 days ago, Google, one of the big tech, was having its annual event. They were mentioning hundreds of billions of dollars that will be invested in this sector and how it will be changing the way we are producing goods. The question is where Africa stands in this process. There are things that are good things which are happening. I would like to highlight a couple of them to illustrate what I want to say. Here in Rwanda, when you talk about innovation, this country has been adopting technology at a very fast pace. And the best example, and we're honored to be associated with this effort, was the production of mRNA vaccines. And I remember vividly when this challenge was put before African leaders, how people didn't believe that it could happen in this continent. And I'm very proud to see how Rwanda has taken this challenge forward and making a reality. By doing that, this is placing African countries on the global map of vaccine production, and also signals the dawn of a burgeoning biotech industry. I would like to emphasize that the AI part of the BioNTech was developed by an African startup, which was bought after BioNTech. So the knowledge was here in the continent. We are now exploring the next phase. We're talking about genomics. Genomics that leverage the rich biodiversity and genetic resources of the continent, laying the groundwork for precision medicines and the development of treatments tailored to the specific needs of African population and diaspora. This is an example of where Africa is taking its claims in a sector that has long been dominated by other regions. All of us can take immense pride in the collaborative project underway in Rwanda, in Senegal, and the corporations that produce these striking results. This is what I call African Continental Free Trade Area in action. But the question one wants to ask, how to multiply this good example? How we don't make this example not an exception, but the rule? I think that to move in that direction, a few conditions need to be met. First, digitalization. Data is the new gold. I repeat, data is the new gold. Secondly, reform and invest our education systems with a particular emphasis on science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and that by distributing equally between women and men. It's heartening to see Rwanda hosting a regional institute of mathematics and IT and forging partnership with well-renowned academic institutions. This is an example that needs to be multiplied and repeated across the continent. We need to support also our startups. It's imperative that more funding, especially from domestic private sector, is directed towards this vibrant sector. At IFC, we're trying to do that with our Disruptive Technology Fund, and we are trying to invest in startups that are investing in technology that will make a difference for development. But we need more billionaires in Africa. We need more millionaires in Africa to believe in these startups and invest in it. These startups are still largely funded with resources coming from the Silicon Valley or other part of the world. This is a challenge that the continent has. The fourth element is the dialogue, the leadership. We know that countries have been developing a public-private partnership and dialogue. A lot of discussion are happening in countries, but there are very rare opportunities where the private sector of the continent is meeting the leadership of the continent. If we want to move forward with the African Free Trade Agreement, these fora need to be created because we want to build African supply chain, African value chain. Therefore, I think that the challenge will be to think about organizing this fora where leadership can hear from the private sector, but also private sector hear the constraints that leaders are facing. Fourth, we need to make sure that businesses in Africa can access to the best brain and the best talent on the continent. We need to have free movement of people, free movement of talent. We cannot move in the Free African Agreement if people cannot come and work in the neighboring African countries, when it's easier for them to go and work in another place, or another continent, and work on their own continent. And I would like to really praise and thank President KAGAME for allowing free visa for African citizens to allow the best brain to come and visit the country. This is the way we will be building human capital. The resource of Senegal could be here. The resource of Tanzania could be in Mali. The resource of Kenya could be in Cote d'Ivoire. That's the way the continent will be building this center of excellence. Let me tell you another sector beside health that I think is important for Africans to create jobs, to improve the living condition of people, which is agriculture and energy transition. Let me start with energy transition. We are in a situation now over the past decade that Africa has seen a significant increase in the production of renewable energy, being solar, wind, and now green hydrogen. But while we have made commendable strides, financing direct investment and mobilizing a large share of this investment in Africa, there is still much to be done. Today, for example, 600 million people do not have access to electricity in Africa. There is an energy crisis which is hampering competitiveness, digitalization, and economic transformation. In response, the World Bank Group is pushing for having an initiative by 2030 to connect 300 million Africans. This is an ambitious goal that will require a lot of work for all of us in the room. But without it, we cannot talk about the transformation of the continent. But as we're moving in that area, we need to look at what are the constraints. A lot of our utilities are not in a good shape, which limits the ability of the private sector to invest in generation. We don't have enough private sector investment in transmission. We don't have enough private sector investment in distribution. All these are factors which are limiting the ability to invest in the sector, which is so crucial for the development of Africa. But as we are thinking about it, we will be just consuming the products that are needed to generate renewable energy, or Africa will think as being part of the value chain for the production of these items which are so important. Africa has a lot of the critical minerals, have copper, have a lot of mining products which are essential to the digital transformation and the renewable energy. How can we work together to make sure that the supply chain, the transformation of it, is happening in the continent, and therefore not only electricity is brought to the poorest of this continent, but also we are creating jobs by doing that. I would like to talk about another topic which is close to my heart. And I quote a singer that people liked in Africa, Bob Marley, "A hungry mob is a hungry mob." I'm talking about food. If people are not fed, the country are unstable. Not only is it unstable, but the productivity of people is going down. So today, we have faced in the last 5 years a crisis whereby African countries were suffering of not having fertilizers, of not having wheat, and were depending largely from the rest of the world. And the fluctuation on the world market affected so much the macroeconomic situation of countries. We cannot continue like that. We cannot continue like that. Africa has arable land. Africa has water. Africa has people. So why the continent cannot produce food at a level which allow us to protect our macroeconomic situation, but also to improve the well-being of people? This is something which is very close to my heart, and I think is at our reach. In that context, I'm glad to have seen recently progress made in the production of fertilizers. IFC's largest investment this year was in the fertilizer sector in Nigeria. We invested also in Morocco in this area. But this is just one input. There are many other inputs which are important and essential to create and have a production of agriculture which is needed for the continent. We need to solve the issue of land. We need to ensure that the small farmers are not excluded for this. We need to make sure that we attract large investors in this sector. Those are those challenges that we are facing and which are here in our hand if we act collectively and we can solve. We cannot go another decade talking about hunger, food security in the continent. This will be our responsibility if it's not solved. In closing, I would like to talk about something which is important that gathers everybody here, which is financing. Where is the money? Looking at the capital market in Africa, we have seen that the capital market is very shallow. And one of the reasons is that there is not enough public offering. And we need to work towards offering to the middle class, the citizens of African countries, an opportunity to hold part of the assets that are in their countries. So we will be calling countries to have more particularly for the SOEs, to opening the capital of the SOEs to the citizens of their countries. To say the electricity company belongs to you also. Buy shares. If this company doesn't do well, you will not earn money. So they will have an interest in making this company work. And if we extend that approach in all sectors, we will be stopping capital flow, which is affecting our countries. People are putting their money outside because they don't have opportunities to invest locally. So let's make sure that we are creating assets for people to invest in mass in our continent. Secondly, we need to talk about equity. When you talk to investors in the continent, they all tell us we don't have enough equity. We need to do more equity support and reduce the leverage that the company has. That's something that IFC will be focusing in the coming years. We intend to double the size of our equity portfolio. That's the way we believe that our initiative of African Champion will be a lasting initiative. Initiative will create a strong class, middle class of African producers who can be part of the world economy and the world market. So, doing that, I think that we'll be able to have the saving of the elite going to less productive activities and go to more productive activities, because they will be finding a very important return and very high return in their investment. So I will stop by saying this thing. 10 years ago, we had this slogan, Africa can. Today, we cannot repeat that slogan. The slogan should be Africa is. Africa is what? Africa is creating jobs for its youth. Africa is building resilient growth. Africa is fostering a robust private sector free of bureaucratic hurdles. Africa is nurturing a healthier population with longer lifespan and ensuring that women have equal rights and opportunities to engage in productive activities. I will leave you with this quote of President Kagame. Africa's story has been written by others. We need to own our problems and solutions and write our story. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Diop. And you know, so I love the point that you made about the fact that not much has changed on the continent in the past 10 years. Africa can is what we said 10 years ago, and Africa is what we're saying right now. This is not part of my script, but the reason why I love the points is that I have had the opportunity to speak to a lot of you in the past 14 years of covering business on the African continent. And not much has changed in terms of how those conversations have gone. And I've always said to my colleagues that, you know, when these captains and the policymakers talk about the fact that we need to, and we need to do this, and we need to do that, I'm like, they've been needing to for the past 10 years. Why isn't it happening? And so I think that that's a wonderful point that you have made, Mr. Diop, on the fact that we cannot be saying the same thing in the next 10 years, and I hope that that won't be the case. But to pick up on the point that has been made by the speakers, most of the speakers so far, the importance of leadership and accountability and governance in pressing forward to achieve a lot of the targets that we are wanting. I suppose it's also no coincidence that the forum is happening in a country that has shown the fruits of sound leadership and governance and accountability and what they can yield. So with that said, ladies and gentlemen, could we all rise as we do welcome a man who many perhaps believe is the epitome of sound leadership and governance and accountability on the African continent right now, His Excellency President Paul Kagame, sir.
Please be seated. Thank you. Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, Philippe Nyusi, President of the Republic of Mozambique, Patrice Trovoada, Prime Minister, of the Democratic Republic of Sao Tome and Principe, Robert Megrebeme Mambe, Prime Minister of the Republic of Cote d'Ivoire, Amir Ben YAHMED, President and founder of the Africa CEO Forum, Makhtar DIOP, Managing Director of the International Finance Corporation, Honorable Prime Ministers, Ministers, and senior government officials, Chief Executive Officers and members of the private sector, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, I'm very pleased to be with you today for the Africa CEO Forum. First, I wish to welcome you all to Kigali. I hope you will enjoy your stay with us. I also want to thank the organizers, the Jeune Afrique group, for hosting Africa's iconic business conference here in Rwanda for the second time. Thank you also to Makhtar DIOP and the International Financial Corporation, one of Africa's most reliable partners. The private sector in Africa and the world at large plays a pivotal role in the trajectory of our development. Intersecting crises from the pandemic all the way to climate change have taught us many important lessons. Among them is the need for the public and private sector to work closely together. The urgency to stop doing business as usual is not new. Over the years, what has become clearer is that our common challenges can be solved if we work together. For our continent, it is equally important to build the capacity to respond swiftly and efficiently to any challenge and bounce back. For example, that's why we established the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. The rationale is that we have the resources, but we need to be able to share them amongst ourselves. Here I also want to add that the more united Africa is, the more productive our engagement with the partners will become. Integration for Africa's business community is an opportunity to grow our markets and become more competitive. Africa does not have to ask for a seat at the table. I want to agree with most of the points made by earlier speakers, and I understand their frustration. We share the same. Today, almost 20% of the world is African. By the year 2050, it will be 25%. Soon enough, the only middle class in the world that will still be growing is Africa's. As this century progresses, Africa will increasingly be one of the world's economic engines. But to become truly prosperous, we have to upgrade our mindsets and aim for quality and complexity in our value chains. We cannot remain a place where people pull rocks out of the ground, which others then turn into high-tech products and sell back to us. It is not sustainable. It's simple and clear. This will take a lot of time and effort, but Africa can do it. In everything we do, in business, politics, or civil society. Anything that can be done anywhere in this world can also be done in Africa. And why don't we just do that? Once again, thank you all for coming to Kigali. I hope you will enjoy your stay with us and come back again and again. My simple but very important task, therefore, this morning was to welcome you and thank you, and we are happy to work with you. Thank you for your kind attention.